Imagine for a moment a conflict that's not just happening on some far-off battlefield. Suddenly, it's right there, deep inside major cities. We're seeing this now in Moscow and in Kyiv. Drone attacks bringing the war, well, right to people's doorsteps. It's a really stark image, isn't it?
A reminder that this war is changing, and changing fast.
It really is.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. These recent drone attacks hitting both Moscow and Kyiv, they show a pretty significant evolution in the Russia-Ukraine war, right?
Absolutely.
So for you listening, we're going to dig into Ukraine's expanded offensive capabilities, look at Russia's air defense vulnerabilities that got exposed, and also the escalating complexity of peace efforts and how international dynamics, especially from the U.S., are playing a huge role in all this.
Yeah, and to help you get a handle on this, because it is incredibly complex and, frankly, changing all the time. We've gone through a whole stack of recent articles, research, news reports, even some specific fact checks.
Right. Our mission really is just to boil it down for you. Get to the most important nuggets of information, cut through some of the noise, give you that shortcut to being well-informed.
Great. So let's start with the drones. This expanding reach, Ukraine has clearly ramped up its offensive capability here.
Russia.
We've seen Ukrainian drones reaching Moscow. Moscow, that's what, over 500 kilometers, more than 310 miles from the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
And these aren't just, minor things. They've caused actual damage apartment buildings, even the Kremlin itself. That feels like a really notable shift in their ability to strike deep inside Russia.
It is. And what's really striking, I think, is how these drones are often described. People say they're relatively crude and cheap.
Huh. Crude and cheap, but they get the job done, apparently.
Well, they seem to possess a pretty significant range. We're talking up to 1,000 kilometers. That's over 620 miles.
Wow.
Now, officially, Ukrainian authorities, they tend to avoid directly claiming responsibility for these specific attacks, but they've certainly, let's say, rejoiced when they have.
Right.
A sort of strategic ambiguity there.
Exactly. And it highlights this shift in modern warfare, doesn't it?
Yep.
Low-cost, asymmetrical threats bypassing these huge, expensive, traditional defense systems. It forces, a whole strategic reevaluation.
Yeah, and it also exposes something else, right?
Yeah.
The Moscow attacks didn't just show Ukraine's reach. They really laid bare some vulnerabilities in Russia's own defenses.
That's a key point.
Experts are saying Russia's air defense systems, they're mostly geared towards big stuff, missiles, ballistic missiles, regional ones, aircraft, bombers.
Right, the conventional threats.
But not these small, short-range drones, especially ones flying really low. That seems like a pretty big gap.
It does, and you have to ask, what's the internal fallout from that? We saw some really strong criticism from prominent figures inside Russia.
Like Prigozhin.
Yeah, Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner group, he didn't mince words, called the military leadership scum, swine even, for failing to protect Moscow.
Strong language, very. And Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen leader, he went so far as to urge nationwide martial law.
So, real internal pressure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And strategically, the potential consequence here is that Russia might have to pull some air defense assets away from the front lines to protect Moscow.
Which would weaken their troops in Ukraine.
Potentially, yes. President Putin himself admitted it's a daunting task. He said they would beef up air defenses around the capital. So it's not just about appearances. It's a real strategic bind for them. Protect the capital or protect the front.
Okay, but it's not a one-way street, is it? While Ukraine was showing its new reach, Russia hit back hard, escalating its own attack.
Oh, absolutely. They really intensified their long-range drone and missile strikes on Ukraine. The sheer volume is kind of staggering.
Yeah, the numbers are wild, using more drones in a single night than they used in whole months back in 2024.
Exactly. Like July 8th, record-breaking barrages, over 700 drones. Then the next day, July 9th, 2025, another 728 drones plus 13 missiles.
And these aren't just hitting empty fields. There are real consequences, right? Yeah. Civilian casualties.
Sadly, yes. That July 9th attack, 5 killed in Rodinsky, 3 in Kostiantynivka, and then more recently, July 19th, 1 dead, 6 wounded in Odessa.
So what are they targeting with all this?
It seems the primary targets are Ukraine's energy infrastructure and its natural gas extraction facilities.
Yeah, the energy grid again.
Yes. Ukrainian officials are accusing Russia of weaponizing winter, basically trying to hurt ordinary Ukrainians by striking energy and gas production facilities, disrupting heat, water, the basics.
It sounds like a deliberate strategy to break morale, make life unbearable.
That certainly seems to be the goal from Ukraine's perspective. The Kremlin, though, their spokesman Dmitry Peskov, says these energy supplies are legitimate targets because they're linked to Ukraine's military-industrial complex.
A grim justification.
It highlights that dark side of modern conflict hitting civilian infrastructure. And remember, while all this is happening in the air, on the ground, Russian forces are apparently advancing in almost all areas of the front. Slow, grinding gains, they call it.
Yeah.
They even reclaimed some territory in the Kursk region after Ukraine had made an incursion there.
Okay, so fighting grinds on, the air war escalates. Let's shift focus now to the peace efforts, or maybe lack thereof, and the role of the U.S. It seems incredibly volatile.
Volatile is a good word for it.
Donald Trump's stance, for instance, it's been, well, all over the place, hasn't it?
It certainly has evolved from ending the war on his first day, then within 6 months, even no longer than 1 day before taking office.
Right. But recently, he's been more critical of Putin directly.
Yes, saying things like, I'm not happy with Putin because he's killing a lot of people. His team apparently sees the war as a distraction, a political liability. His special envoy, Keith Kellogg, is aiming for a lasting ceasefire within the first 100 days if Trump returns to office.
Interesting. But the interactions between the U.S. and Ukraine themselves have been pretty rocky, too, right? That Oval Office meeting.
Yes, the extraordinary televised Oval Office meeting back on February 28, 2025. Reports say Trump and Zelensky literally shouted and argued.
She shouted.
And Trump apparently threatened to pull U.S. support, saying quite bluntly, you're either going to make a deal or we're out.
That's immense pressure.
Huge. And then Vice President J.D. Vance weighed in later, calling Zelensky disrespectful for litigating the argument publicly, and said he wasn't expressing enough thanks.
But wasn't that disputed, the thanks part?
It was. Fact-checkers pointed out numerous times Zelensky had expressed gratitude, including apparently during that very meeting. There were other claims made around that time, too, that didn't quite hold up.
Like the aid figures.
Right. Trump claimed $350 billion in aid, but the actual estimates are closer to $175, $185 billion. Still a massive amount, of course, but not $350 billion. And Vance claims Zelensky campaigned against Republicans in Pennsylvania, which was also incorrect. It was an official visit.
So quite a bit of friction and maybe misrepresentation there.
It certainly shows the leverage the U.S. has and how individual personalities and negotiating styles can really impact these critical relationships and, global stability.
And that contentious meeting, it had real immediate consequences, didn't it? The U.S. actually paused aid.
It did. Temporarily suspended military aid and intelligence sharing. That included cutting off Ukraine's access to unclassified satellite imagery.
Which must have really hurt their ability to defend themselves and plan strikes.
Sources said it significantly diminished their capabilities. The clear intention behind the pause was, reportedly, to pressure Ukraine into accepting a peace deal.
So using aid as direct leverage for diplomacy.
Exactly. The aid and intelligence were eventually restored, but only after they agreed to that joint 30-day ceasefire deal brokered in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. It just underscores how tightly linked military support and political goals are.
Okay, so there's a ceasefire deal, at least temporarily. What about Putin? What are his conditions for making it stick?
Well, Putin laid out some specific preconditions. He wants talks about Ukrainian troops pulling back from that Kursk region they entered. He wants guarantees that Ukraine won't use the 30-day ceasefire just to rearm or bring in new forces.
Makes sense from his perspective.
And he wants clarity on how the ceasefire would actually be monitored. Trump's reaction was interesting. He called Putin's statement very promising but incomplete.
Incomplete, meaning?
And he was still willing to apply maximum pressure, including sanctions, presumably to get more concessions.
And Zelensky's take?
Zelensky seems skeptical. He believes Putin is actually preparing to reject the proposals altogether and is just afraid to tell President Trump directly that he wants to continue this war. He's pushing for more sanctions, not fewer.
So not exactly a meeting of minds, even on a ceasefire. It sounds like a high-stakes game of chicken, almost.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
Each side is interpreting peace and ceasefire through their own strategic objectives. It's intense political maneuvering.
Okay, let's zoom out for the big picture. What does all this U.S. pressure, this talk of deals, mean for Ukraine's other allies, particularly in Europe?
That's a really important question. The implications are pretty significant. European Union leaders are definitely mindful, as reports say, that they might need to shoulder more of the burden for arming Ukraine.
They see the potential for U.S. support fluctuating.
Clearly, they've agreed to significantly ramp up their own military spending. Trump's view, as stated, is that NATO allies are free riding. He expects Europeans to, quote, buckle up, step up, spend more, and take their security into their own hands.
Especially since NATO membership for Ukraine
Seems off the table for now, yes. So
Yeah.
it signals this potential major rebalancing of defense responsibilities globally. Europe might have to become much more self-reliant.
Yeah, you can see why they'd be nervous and start preparing for that possibility. This unpredictable U.S. stance forces them to rethink, well, everything about collective security.
It really does.
So let's try and wrap this up. What does this all mean for you, listening to this?
Well, it seems clear the conflict is deepening, both literally, with strikes hitting far from the front lines, and diplomatically, with all this complex maneuvering.
That boxing match analogy we sometimes hear, it kind of holds. Both sides are trading heavy blows. You can see it impacting their strategy, their stamina. And then you have these external players, especially the U.S., jumping into the ring, influencing the fight with their interventions, their demands.
Yeah, it's messy.
Which leads us to maybe a final thought to leave you with. This shifting landscape of U.S. politics, it creates such a turbulent environment, doesn't it? Vital support can just get switched off. Diplomatic efforts get tangled up with domestic politics.
Right.
So it really makes you wonder, in an era where global leadership can seem so unpredictable, what's the real cost for a nation relying heavily on external aid? How much control can any country truly have over its own fate when the stakes are this high on the world stage? Something to think about.